So we are continuing our discussion on this Purusha Suktam. So you find that in the title we have mentioned Purusha Suktam from Rig Veda. I think I mentioned earlier that this Purusha Suktam is one of those hymns which are found in all the four Vedas, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharva Veda. Of course, in the Yajur Veda, in the Taittiriya Aranyaka, it is much longer than the version that you find in Rig Veda. In Rig Veda, you find there are only 16 mantras, and in Yajur Veda, that is Taittiriya Aranyaka version, you find 24 verses. So it's much longer. But therefore, to complete the topic, to deal with the subjects that we are discussing, sometimes I will be referring to the Yajurvedic version also. So this is just for your information. Especially today we will be taking up the subject of Yajna, which is an important theme in the Purusha Suktam. The cosmology and the cosmogony of Vedic tradition, Vedic cosmology and Vedic cosmogony, and also the Vedic equivalent of Genesis you will find in the Purusha Suktam. If that can be excused, if I use the word Vedic equivalent of Genesis, you find. So I shall just recapitulate what I said in the last class. Etavanasya mahima ato jayamscha purushaha padosya vishwabhudani tribadasyamudam divi. Now, those of you, at least some of the listeners, may be used to this chanting and not always with the proper understanding of the meaning. So, jayagumscha purushaha. So, it is jayan, that's a word, which means superior, higher, more. That's the meaning here. So, what it says is, the entire Paramatman, the cosmic existence, it functions in two different dimensions. The transcendental, the immanent, and the all-pervading or omnipresent, that's on the one hand, and the empirical, the phenomenon. And actually you cannot divide, you cannot drive a dividing line between the Paramatman, the transcendental and empirical. But the Vedic poets use this powerful and absolutely charming imagery. The absolute reality, that 3/4 of it exists as the transcendental, and the same absolute reality, 1/4 exists as the empirical. So the empirical reality is the phenomenal world, which we experience in the three states of consciousness, that is the waking, the dream and the deep sleep states, that is called Jagrat, Sopna, Sushupti. These are the three states of awareness that we use to interact with the empirical phenomenal reality. And it manifests as so many names and forms and diversities and so on. This changing, the constantly evolving and changing phenomenal existence. This is one, the empirical, and the transcendental is 3/4. 3/4 and 1/4, remember, it is just a powerful tool used by the poet. It's a poetic tool, a poetic instrument that he uses, So remember, when the highest Vedanta is expressed in the language of powerful poetry, imagination, it takes vivid forms, vivid colors, and vivid imaginations. Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ayam Atma Brahma, all these great statements in the Upanishads, they try to state the fact in the language of brevity. But the Vedic poet just sings, and in this mystical song, you can find this imagery. That's why etavan asya mahima. Etavan, whatever you see around you, which of course Samaveda, which is chanted in much more elongated, longer vowels, called tavan asya mahima, asya purushasya mahima. So whatever you see around, what your eyes and ears and what different senses of perception and mind bring to you, all these are indications of the glory of the Paramatman. But the Paramatman in its pure form is above all this. Jhayan is superior to all this. So it can be, in the language of Sri Ramakrishna, Shiva and Shakti, Brahman and Shakti, we call it. So in Shankaracharya's own Stoda Shiva Shaktiya Yukto, if there is these are all great poetical works in Shankaracharya. And also you find in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna says, the snake and its ability to move, Brahman and its function as this phenomenal world. It is Shakti. So this empirical phenomenon corresponds to the Shakti aspect, the kinetic, the functional aspect of Brahman, and the transcendental, the 3/4 corresponds to the potential, the transcendental dimension, not the empirical dimension. So Padaha Asya Bhutani. So Asya Bhutani. Asya Padaha Imani Bhutani, that's idea means. The Purushasya Padaha, 1/4 of this Purusha, 1/4 of this Paramatman manifests itself as this empirical world. Bhutani means all things which have come into existence. So whatever you see in this empirical world, things which have come into existence, exist for some time and disappear later. Just as a phenomenal world, during waking state we see things, during dream state we see the same things but in a different way. In deep sleep state we don't see anything. So there is diversity and difference with regard to our consciousness or experience or awareness at the empirical level. But there is one turiya, the seer, the witness, the subject, the perceiver, the unchanging witness, and what the witness witnesses, the empirical phenomena. The empirical phenomena undergo change and the witness remains unchanging. Turiya is the witness, the drashta. So 3/4 functions as turiya and 1/4 padosya vishwabhudani. So as vishwabhudani asya padaka. So this entire empirical world is 1/4 of it. There it says asya mahima purushasya mahima samarthya visheshaga annatu tasya vastava swarupaha. This empirical world undergoes changes all the time. This empirical world doesn't represent the full picture of the reality. So, and then of course we discussed this, but it's important to remember this again. Padosya Vishwabhutani Tribadasya Amurdam Divi. So Purushasya Avasishtam Tribadaswarupam Vinasharahitam Dyodanatmaki Suprakasharupe Vyavatishtade. That is Sayanacharya. Remember, Sayanacharya was the great commentator who wrote commentaries on all the 4 Vedas. Before Sayanacharya, there was Bhattabhaskara and there were others. And after him also, this Mahidhara, who came in the nearly 16th century, and Sayanacharya, he was living in the 14th century during the early phase of Vijayanagara Empire. And before him there was Bhattabhaskara, and again before him there was in the 6th century AD, that is roughly around 150 years before Shankaracharya, there was the great commentator known as Skanda Swami, who was also, he is supposed to be the most authentic among the earlier commentators of Vedic literature. The most authentic commentator of the later period of Vedic commentary, Vedic interpretative literature is Sayana, who is supposed to be the most authentic because his interpretation is not exactly obsessed with the ritualistic attitude, but rather he gives a lot of importance to metaphysical aspects of Vedic literature. Now we are coming to the 4th mantra, and this is a very important mantra. We will discuss the 4th one. Tribadodha udait purushaha padosyeha bhavat punaha tato vishwam vyakkramat sasanasane abhi. This is the 4th mantra which we will discuss now. So, Tripad, as I mentioned, the 3/4. Pada means a quarter. So 3/4 of this transcendental reality functions as the eternal, unchanging Purusha. It is beyond everything. Urdha. Udaidat utkrishena vivatishtade. That's a Sayanacharya's commentary. Again, the same absolute reality which functions as the transcendental, it again and again, asya padaha iha puna abhavad, is an old expression. Abhavat is the modern Sanskrit language, which means 1/4 of this Purusha, it manifests again and again as this manifested universe. Now, again, to explain this further, not only the empirical phenomena, but also the living creatures and living organisms, the Vedas use this word sasana anasane abhi. So, sasana and anasane, that's the meaning. Sasana means things which function, eating, living, which breeds, which we can see, consuming things. Bhojanadi mean, actually that's the meaning here, but that which eats. By implication, it means animals or human beings, all these living organisms which live and breathe and eat and which are living creatures, and also anasani, those organisms which like rocks and mountains and valleys, all this. So everything together, they all constitute this empirical changing reality, which corresponds to 1/4 or 1/4 of this reality. Again, but at the same time, this Purusha as Paramatman, Vishwam Vyakkramat, it envelops, it pervades everything in this world in all directions. So, this is the important thing. Of course, the same idea is being represented and interpreted by some other commentators by taking some imageries from books like Mandukya Karika. For example, Mangalacharya, Mahidhara, Nimbarkacharya. These are some of the commentators who have written commentaries on Purusha Suktam. Nimbarka has not written any commentary as such on Vedic literature as a whole, but you find Purusha Sukta as being subjected to interpretation by many commentators with a strong monotheistic orientation. So, Sayanacharya, who was a follower of Shankaracharya's Advaita, he uses the word Paramatma Surupa, the transcendental reality. According to Ramanuja, and Nimbarka and others who consider Purusha Sukta as very, very important. Of course, Narayana Suktam is more important for Vaishnava, Sri Vaishnavas. They look upon this transcendental reality as a monotheistic creator God who creates this world, who lives within everything in this world as Antaryami, as an indweller, and who blesses the whole creation, who takes care of the world, who listens to our prayers, and who protects all living beings. So this 3/4, which is interpreted as the transcendental unchanging reality Paramatma Sarupa by Sayanacharya, is interpreted as all-knowing Saguna Sakara Sabhisesha Ishvara by non-Advaitic schools of philosophers. There is not much difference, because according to the Saguna Sakara schools of Vedanta, means Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, Nimbarka, Vallabha and others, the highest reality is a God who creates his world, who is full of attributes, endowed with all attributes, with Sagala Guna Kalyana Nidhi, as Ramanuja says, is a repository of all conceivable supreme spiritual qualities and attributes. So that's a minor difference between the interpretations of Advaitins and non-Advaitins. But we are not technically concerned with that. After this, we can read the commentary, since you are interested, because after this, after the sixth, with the sixth mantra, Purusha Sukta begins to take a new turn, explaining the creation of the world as an act of self-sacrifice on the part of Paramatma Surupa. So how from Paramatman Virat Purusha emerges, how from Virat Purusha the entire cosmos emerges, and with diverse forms and names. So you can imagine Srishti or creation is interpreted as an act of self-sacrifice by the Purusha. That will later. Sayam Saha Ayam Urdham Ud Aid Asmad Ajnanakarya Samsarat Bahirbhudaha Gunadoshehi Asprushta Sthidavan Utkarshena Sthidavan. So Sayanacharya says there is a great difference between the empirical and the transcendental. The 1/4 or 1/4 of this reality and the 3/4, which is the transcendental. That is, the transcendental reality remains always untouched, either by good things or bad, good or bad. Because if you try to give attributes to the absolute reality, that also will amount to defining the reality. And the moment you try to define something, you are limiting its scope. So if you suppose somebody says God is a kind-hearted person, that means God equals a kind-hearted person. So there you have closed the lid, you have defined God. So that definition itself is an incomplete expression of the divine. Then what about the opposite of the good? So you have to invent a devil for it, as the Christian and or Abrahamic traditions have done. They solve the problem very easily. You put all the blame on the devil, the Beelzebub, that's what we can call it, and he is responsible for all the problems. So you can have a very, very interesting and simple definition of God. But Vedanta goes beyond that. Vedanta says the absolute reality cannot even be defined as the totality of all that is good. And that's why I said many times earlier that Meister Eckhart, the 13th century German theologian who was a Dominican priest, he comes very close to saying that God cannot even be defined as Father, Son and Holy Ghost. That you cannot even limit God by saying, by bringing in the Holy Trinity, because that also amounts to definition, and definition is always a limitation. So that's why Sayanacharya says, Asmat Ajnana Karyat Samsarat Bahirbhutaka Gunadoshehi Asprishtastidavan. So this absolute reality remains untouched, either by guna or dosha, by good or bad. It transcends both. Tasya leshaha mayayam srishti samkharabhyam puna agachadi asya padaka iha puna abhavat. This particular Purusha Sukta, mantra bhaga, part of mantra, is interpreted by Sayanacharya in a typical, in the classical language of Advaita. Tasya leshaka mayayam srishti samkharabhyam punaragachadi. So this empirical world, it comes into existence, exists for some time, and disappears, again takes birth in another form. So if we can think of the history of creation, actually the very term itself is ridiculous, because according to Vedanta, it comes, goes, and again returns. So it's like a cyclic rotation. It goes on. So Vedantic or Vedic cosmology and cosmogony can be only understood in the language of this metaphor of a wheel that goes on rotating. It doesn't really begin anywhere and doesn't end anywhere. Because Maya means limitation. Maya means relativity. Something that exists but doesn't exist for all time. That it exists within the framework of time, space, and causation. Is caused by something, it cannot exist independent of itself. It exists within the time frame because it comes and it changes. It means it goes on changing. So it is subject to time. And also space. You need time, space, and causation. So Sayanacharya says, my tasya leshaka mayayam srishti samkharabhyam punaragachadi. So it comes and goes. It is affected by sattva guna, rajo guna, tamo guna, and within the sphere of Maya, this 1/4 comes and goes. It is created, existing, and then after some time it disappears. So the commentators will quote, Vishtabhyahamidam Krishnam ekam sena sthido jagat. All the Bhagavad Gita mantras, slogas are frequently quoted in support of this view of Sayanacharya. Again, Tataha mayayam agatyanandiram vishwam, that is deva manusha tirigadi rupena vividha san. What happens is, it comes into existence in the form of Maya, and then it exists in the form of different living creatures, that is asana and also anasana, things that do not engage in any activities like eating or anything like that. So in all this sachetana and achetana, things which are effulgent and things which are non-effulgent, in all these, this Purusha exists as an antaryami, as an indweller. So then of course there is the important expression is given of sashana and anashana. This according to Sayanacharya, sashanam bhojanadi vyaparopedam anashanam tad rehidam. Again I explained all this. Anashana means which doesn't, things which animals or creatures they have to eat and exist. They are called sashana. And anashana means the opposite. I mean mountains and valleys and all this which do not normally engage in any of these activities. Girinaryadikam chedana chedanam tadubhayam yata syat tatha vividho bhutva abhivikramati. Goes on rotating. This is the Maya. Now, after this, the fifth mantra, and fifth mantra discusses one important subject, and that's the end of it, the particular subject. Tasma virarajayada virajo adipurushaha sujado atirichyada pachad bhumi madho puraka. This mantra says, from this Paramatma Swarupa, this cosmic mind, Virat Purusha comes into existence. From Virat Purusha, this phenomenal world, the universe of diversities, different names and forms and changes come into existence. So the whole process of evolution is explained here. That is, from Paramatman, Virat Purusha, through Maya, this Atman, through the mechanism of Maya. We cannot say Atman is making use of Maya. The very idea of the perfect, eternal, immortal, unchanging Brahman existing in the form of this changing, non-eternal, impermanent world, that phenomenon, that mystical question is resolved by this unique mechanism put forward by Shankaracharya, and that mechanism is Maya. So what is Maya? Maya implies the same thing as Mithya, in this context at least. Something that is not absolutely non-existent, but something which is not existing all the time. So it is neither absolute existence. When you call something which is absolutely existing, its absolute existence means it should be existing all the time, in the past, present and future, without any change. It is called something which is absolute existence, or something which exists in an absolute sense. Maya, or anything within Maya, doesn't exist all the time in the same manner. This is another thing. It should be unchanging. Something which is existing all the time without any change, and that alone can qualify for this, for the status of absolute reality in Vedanta. Vedanta will consider this world unreal only in the sense that this world is not going to exist in the same manner all the time without a change. In that sense, this world is within Maya. So there should be something which should not be part of this world, which should be something that transcends this world, which doesn't come into existence because it exists all the time. It doesn't exist because existence is a word that you use with regard to something that comes into existence and then ceases to exist. This world is like that. It comes into existence and then it changes. So it doesn't remain the same all the time. So it comes and goes. And that is Maya. But the absolute reality, Brahman or Paramatma, is something that is that never existed, because it is even beyond existence. It is called Shat Vikara Atita. It goes beyond the six changes. What are the six changes? Jayade asti vardhade viparinamade apakshide vinashyati. Coming to existence, existing, growing, evolving, decaying and disappearing. Six changes. This world is subject to these six changes. So everything that is within these six changes is called Maya or Mithya. Atman is beyond all this. That's why when you say Atman doesn't exist, you know what it means? Atman doesn't exist the way we say this world exists. Simple thing. A pot comes into existence when a pot maker uses his tools and clay. Atman doesn't come into existence the way a pot comes into existence. The pot did not exist before it came into existence in the hands of a potter. There are different rules for that. So, It is called Pragabhava, like that. I'm not going to those details. So Brahman always exists. So the very word existence itself cannot be employed, but we use it only for want of a better term. Brahman is beyond definition. So Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, or Satchidanandam, all these terms are used. They do not clearly define Brahman in the sense that it limits Brahman. It is only a verbal approximation as far as it is possible for us to explain something, to define something which can never be defined. So this is an important thing to remember. Of course, Sayanacharya is strongly Advaitic in his interpretation. So that's why we are discussing these points here. And then, of course, he says, Purvokta mantrartham prapanchade vishwam vyakramad. In this particular mantra, which is the fifth mantra, according to Sayanacharya, the Vedic Rishi, Narayana Rishi, he is trying to further explain the last, one part of the last mantra, that is, Vishwam Vyakramat, that is the mantra in the fourth mantra, part of the fourth mantra. Tato Vishwam Vyakramat. From that Virat Purusha, this Vishwam, that is 1/4, was created. How did this happen? To explain that, the fifth mantra is given according to Sayana's commentary. So he says, Purvokta mantrartham prapanchade vishwam vyakramat iti. Tasman, that is from the Atman, from Brahman, Virat. So from that Purusha, that is Paramatman, this cosmic existence, this cosmic body came into existence. And then from that Purusha came in. Tad dekhabhimani kasit Purusha utpannaha. From that, what happens? All these different living entities came into existence, and the same Purusha manifested within all living beings as the indweller. This is the idea behind. From 6th and 7th mantra onwards, we are discussing the concept of yajna. So I shall try to give a detailed description of this concept of yajna. It is very famous, remember. So one important point to remember, most of you, is the 7th mantra of Rigveda doesn't give a full picture. So after the 6th mantra, you have to go to the Krishna Yajurveda version of Purusha Suktam. So Purusha Suktam, it's much more comprehensive, much more complete in the Krishna Yajurveda, that Taittiriya Aranyaka version. It has got 24 mantras, which actually gives a much more comprehensive explanation of Srishti, or creation, as a sacrifice, as a sacred ritual of sacrifice done by Paramatman, this Purusha. So, let me see the, this 6th mantra is Tayyat Purushena Kavisha Deva Yajnamadanyata Vasanto Asyad Ajyam Grishma Itma Sharat Kavihi. This is the 6th mantra. After that, there is another mantra which comes not in Rigveda but in Yajurveda. And that mantra is Saptasyasan Parithayaha Trisapta Samidha Kritaha Deva Tad Yajnam Tanvanaha Abadhan Purushan Pashu. So in this imagery of creation as a yajna, you have to understand many things about this. It's a very profound idea. Now, Paramatman itself is sacrifices itself and manifests itself as this world of diversities. From the highest point of view, creation and creator are non-distinct. They are the same. But from the non-Advaitic point of view, there is a clear-cut difference and distinction between creator and creation. So, before going further, I shall try to explain this concept of yajna. Yajna is the word used in this Purusha Suktam. Deva yajna matanvada. You can find all this. And also, Havi, Purusham, Pashum, all these are used. Havi means sacrificial materials. Ajyam means ghee, clarified butter, that is used for all these rituals. And then there is a yajna pashu, something that is to be sacrificed. Remember, when you use the word sacrifice or yajna, when translated into the English word sacrifice, it doesn't mean sacrificing animals, nothing of the kind. Absolutely different. What it means is, this creation itself is a great act of sacred ritual of renunciation on the part of Brahman. The transcendental, all-pervading Brahman manifests in all of us as a divine spark, apparently limited by this body mechanism. So this phenomenon is explained in the light of an imagery of yajna. So first we must know what is yajna. First of all, most of you must have heard of the Pancha Mahayajna, which normally practiced by all householders. That is Brahma Yajnam, Deva Yajnam, Pitru Yajnam, Aditi Yajnam, Bali Vaishudeva Yajnam. So every day, of course there are different interpretations of this. Every day we give up something, act of renunciation. Yajna is defined by one of the Vedic commentators called Katyayana in his Sutra Vyakhya is called. Is one of the Vedic hermeneutists. So according to him, yajna vai seshtatamam karma. Yajna is any noble act of renunciation, unselfishness can be called yajna. So anything that we do with a definite purpose, with a definite motive, to fulfill a strong felt desire, it is not yajna. The same work, whether even if you are building a bridge, taking care of your children, teaching in a university, whatever it is, when it is done as a sacred deed, sacred activity, without a selfish motive, with the sense of sanctity and sacredness, it is called yajna. That way yajna vai sreshtatamam karma. A karma or an action becomes sreshtatama, means noblest, highest. Those of you are interested, if you read Mahatma Gandhi's My Experiments with Truth, when he talks about how Gita influenced him, so he says that Gandhiji was not a Sanskrit scholar or a philosopher in the true sense of the term, but he was a deep and dedicated student of Bhagavad Gita, which he considered to be like his mother. So what influenced him was this art of doing everything with total non-attachment, which he called anasakti, Sanskrit word, which means non-attachment. It's an example of yajna. So a politician also can practice yajna. Another interpretation of yajna is more commonplace. That is, devadodeshena dravyasya tyagaha yajna. So if you go to a temple, you perform a ritual and you give up something you give, or you do a puja in your own home. It is called a kind of yajna, in the sense you do that with some purpose. You may want to get some, you may be praying to God for fulfilling some needs, and as a part of this prayer you may give up something money or wealth or literature, that is also yajna. But the most sublime, most elevated meaning of the word yajna is yajno vai sreshtatamam karma. Now, to understand the metaphor of yajna in the Purusha Sukta, it's called Prajapatya Yajnam. It's called Prajapati Yajnam. It's called. That's a term used. That's the yajna metaphor used in the Purusha Suktam. To understand this, we should know a little about this yajna concept. So one thing is, of course, the real root meaning is shun abhishavi. That's a dhatu, which actually means savo yajne susanthani. I mean, you just have a desire for achieving something good in your life and for others, and you perform a yajna. So that can become a yajna. Now, there were two types of these yajnas of Vedic sacrifices prevailing in ancient times, which is not the subject of discussion in the Purusha Suktam interpretation. In Purusha Suktam, the Srishti of creation itself is the result of a yajna, of a noble act on the part of Paramatman. But to understand the sublime concept of yajna or yajna used in Purusha Suktam, I want to give little more details. The reason why I am giving these details is yajna is frequently translated into English word sacrifice. Actually, it is not a very happy or complete or satisfactory translation. Yajna is an act of noble deed, kind-hearted, compassionate, full of a sense of renunciation, serenity and sanctity. But anyway, there were two types of these Vedic sacrifices prevalent in ancient times. So one was called Sapta Havir Yajna, the other was called Sapta Soma Yajna. 7 kinds of yajnas or Vedic rituals, better called Vedic ritual, not Vedic sacrifice. So the moment you talk about sacrifice, immediately you bring Abraham and trying to sacrifice his son, and all those things will come. So that's why we have done enough mischief to betray the true meaning in which the great sages wrote all these wonderful things, So let us try to avoid doing more damage to that. So the word yajna should be translated not into the English word sacrifice, but as a sacred ritual, sacred ceremony. That is yajna. You are teaching in a university, you are an ideal teacher, you have acquired knowledge, you consider as your sacred duty to teach a new generation, so that the knowledge you have acquired from your teacher, you return to the teacher by teaching your students. So it's called a Deva Yajna or Brahma Yajna in the Vedic context, or Rishi Yajna. Actually, when we discuss these great subjects, we are actually paying homage to the great sages of Vedic times. It is called a Rishi Yajna, called Brahma Yajna. I mean, yajna done, a kind of act of paying back to the great knowers of Brahman or the great sages of the past. So a professor teaching a student is also performing what we call Rishi Yajna. The wisdom he got from his teacher, he transmitting to another person, another generation. So that is yajna. Why? If he does it with a sense of dedication, sanctity and sacred, it is yajna. It is not killing an animal in front of somebody and nothing of the kind. Totally different, absolutely misleading. So coming to the subject, Sapta Havir Yajna. Havi, actually it means a sacrificial material. Well, we call the materials, things which are needed for this sacred ritual. Mostly you find, what do they use for these Vedic rituals? They need samit, I mean the fagots of wood, pieces of wood. We are going to discuss in the Trivado, Daudai, Purusha, if you find the coming mantras which are really from Taittiriya Aranyaka, we'll discuss maybe next day. We'll discuss how that altar where this Vedic ritual is performed is explained in the light of 12 months, 5 seasons, Grishma, Hemanta, Shishira and so on, and also the 5 senses of perception, the 5 senses of action, the 5 elements which constitute our physical actions and entity, and our mind. And finally, this mind should be ritually offered to Paramatman. And that is a process of contemplation or meditation. And Paramatman itself, the all-pervading divine reality, performed this creation of this world as an act of sacred ritual. So, the 7 yajnas called Sapta Havir Yajna, where Havis is offered in the fire. Ik Agnadhanam or Agnihotram, Deshapurnamasam, Pinda Pitriyajnam, Agrayanam, Chaturmasam, Nirudha Pasubandham, and Sautramani. Some of these are not being practiced in modern times, some of them are still being practiced. It's called Sapta Havir Yajna. Then there are Sapta Soma Yajnas. Yajnas of Vedic rituals in which Soma is offered. Soma is the extracted liquid of some sacred herbs, which according to some traditional scholars are no more available anywhere in this world, but in today's performances in some places of India, they still somehow they grow that old Soma Lata, called the Soma plant, which is a herbal plant. The Soma Yaga or Agnishtoma, Atyagnishtoma, Udkhya, Shodasi, Vajapeya, Adhiratra and Aptoryama. These are the 14 types of yajnas which are normally performed. In the 7th mantra, you find something very interesting. The Vedic altar where yajna is performed is explained. For example, there will be 7 borders, which are again they place a fagot or something, 7 places, and they do the sankalpa. Sayanacharya will tell you sankalpa means when you do this, we must meditate or think in our mind, this is equal to something. For example, 7 Vedic meters constitute the protecting elements of this ritual. 7 Vedic meters. They are Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup, Brihadi, Pankti, Trishtup, Jagati. This is one way of interpreting. So you can find the Saptasya Sen Paridhega, Trisapta Samidhakritaha, Likya Deva. So you find in the Taittiriya Aranyaka version, which we will discuss in the coming sessions. So to begin with, I want to give this brief explanation of yajna. In the Bhagavad Gita also, the word yajna comes in its most sublime sense. Yajna thar karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaga tudartham karma kaundeya mukta sangha samachara. Any person who does his work, duty or activity, any activity, other than as yajna, I mean in a way without considering that duty as yajna, that person is caught, trapped, is bound. So, yajna thar karmanaha anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. So, any activity that you do in this world, without this sense of sanctity and sacredness, and this what you call non-attachment, without any selfish desire. If a person does it with a lot of selfish desire, boundless ambitions and ego and strong motive, sense of motive, that activity itself becomes a bondage. On the other hand, the same work done as yajna becomes a tool that breaks the binding chains. It becomes a path towards our own liberation. So every activity can be and should be done as yajna. That is, as a noble, sacred, ritualistic activity. Then it saves us from bondages. Otherwise, if we do it with a great sense of ambition and selfish motive and attachment, then it becomes a great invisible chain that binds us to this world. So, the whole creation itself, the whole Srishti or creation, is now conceived to be an act of elaborate Vedic ritual in which Brahman, Paramatma, sacrifices himself. Not that he sacrifices, not in that sense, that sacrifice a word should not be misled. This all-pervading reality begins to manifest in all living beings as the divine spark. This is the yajna. So, the all-pervading transcendental reality existing as the immanent reality. This is yajna. So that Brahman becomes omnipresent through immanence. It is present in everything, and in that way it becomes all-pervading. So we will come to that in the coming sessions. It's a very profound poetry and a profound philosophical concept which should be understood only when we understand the true meaning of this word yajna. It's called Prajapati yajnam, Prajapati yajnam. These different terms are used in that part of the Vedic mantra. And after that, there is something much more interesting. What happens? What is the use of studying all this? Towards the end of this mantra, this particular Purusha Suktam, the sage, after reading all this, after meditating on this, he says, Vedahamedam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat Tameva Viditva Adimurti Medi Nanyapantha Vidyati Ayanaya. The most profound statements that's found in the Vedic literature, and Swami Vivekananda used to quote this verse again and again as the clarion call of universal spirituality. Vedahamedam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat. I have realized that divine all-pervading reality, which is effulgent, self-effulgent, as the sun, as the self-effulgent sun, and that realization has destroyed the darkness of ignorance from my heart. And then he says, there is no other way for anyone who aspires to become immortal, except, it's not possible for us to become immortal without realizing and experiencing our own identity, the immortal spirit Atman. This is how it ends. That's later, it's called Uttanarayanam. The second Anuvaga it comes. It is not found in the Rigveda. That's why we have to combine the Rigvedic version with Krishna Yajurvediya version. It's called Taittiriya Aranyaka. Now you can ask questions. Most welcome. Yeah, see now. Yeah.
You explained Tasmaha Virana Jayata.
Yeah.
The two more sentences after Virajo Adi Purusha Sajato Atyarchada. I don't know whether it's in the Yajurveda version only or in Rigveda also.
Where you find?
Tasmaha Virana Jayata, following the Virajo Adi Purusha.
It is in Rigveda. It is found in the Rigveda, Tasma Virada Jayada. It is in the Rigveda, certainly. I think I discussed this, It is in Rigveda. So so I'm referring to Sayanacharya's commentary on Rigveda only here, because Yajurveda commentary I have not brought. It's there, but I am not referring to that.
Virajo Adi Purusha.
Yeah.
What is that referring to?
Virajo Adi Purusha. So the point is, see, that's again, we should always refer to Sayanacharya. That's the essence of our fundamental text of Indian philosophy. That's the title. So what are the fundamental texts? Sayanacharya is one of the fundamental texts. Adi Purushat Brahmanda Dekhaka Virat Dekhasya Upari Aparimidameva Dekham Adhikaranam Krutva. What it means, you see, this from this Paramatman, and Paramatman is called Adi Purusha by Sayanacharya's commentary. Sayanacharya commentary. This cosmic intelligence, Virat, Brahmanda, we call in Sanskrit, came into existence. And the Brahmanda became the Adhikaranam. Adhikaranam means the support, the Adipurusha. So, Tasmat Virat Virajaka Adi. So, Adi here implies this Brahmanda, the Virat itself became the Adhikaranam. Adhikaranam means the support. Or where you sit, a table on which you sit, the table is the support, it is Adhikaranam. And this Virat Purusha came into existence. Virat Purusha identifies himself with this entire cosmic universe. So, the attributeless impersonal Parabrahman, how from that Parabrahman this physical, tangible universe came into existence. So, in the later part of the commentaries, Naramantra says, through Maya. And through Maya, this universe, this empirical universe came into existence from the Paramatman. We should not, again, that's a problem of word. How the attributeless, transcendental, formless reality manifests as this physical universe which has a form, which has a lot of attributes. That mystery is resolved by using this technique of using Maya. So Maya is not used in Purusha Suktam. The word Maya is brought in this commentary by Sayanacharya. Mayayam, it happens in Maya. So the absolute manifesting as the relative. There is no other way of explaining. Because Maya is not absolute existence, but it's not absolute non-existence. So something that seems to be real till you realize that it is not real. And that realization is nothing but the realization that Brahman is the only absolute reality. When you realize this question we will not raise. That's the point. Maya or Mithya is something that we consider to be absolutely real till we realize what is the absolute reality. When we realize that, this question itself disappears. Old rope and snake. Yeah.
You mentioned Pancha Mahayajna.
Pancha Mahayajna. Pancha Mahayajna is, I can explain this,
You mentioned Brahma Yajna, Deva Yajna.
Yeah. Of course, there are different. Brahma Yajnam, Deva Yajnam, Pitru Yajnam, Adithi Yajnam, Bali Vaishudeva Yajnam. Brahma Yajnam can be called as a sense of indebtedness to Brahmajnanis of ancient times. Deva Yajnam.
The Yajnas are, there is a parallel in the 5 Vedas.
Remember, these Panchamaha Yajnas are 5 rituals performed by householders, to be performed by householders in their life. Here, the Yajna need not necessarily mean what Yajna means in Purusha Sukta. In Purusha Suktam, this Yajna is sublimated to the highest philosophical, mystical level. The yajna concept is used in Purusha Suktam to resolve the mystery of this empirical world coming into existence from the trans-empirical, transcendental reality. But when I was trying to introduce the very concept of yajna, I gave the list of the Sapta Havir Yajnas, Sapta Soma Yajnas, which are performed by students of Vedas, Vedanta, not Vedanta, but Vedas, householders, to be performed as a ritual, obligatory for certain groups belonging to certain Vaidika tradition, Vedic Sampradayas. Pancha Maha Yajnas are compulsory for all householders. This Pancha Maha Yajna also can, sometimes in some books you find Pitri Yajna, Bhuta Yajna, Nara Yajna, Rishi Yajna, like that you find. But here Brahma Yajna is nothing but the essence here, essence of indebtedness. Actually, Yajna here means paying back, giving back something. So that also involves the fundamental theme of Yajna, that is renunciation, giving up desires. So, for example, how do you perform Brahma Yajna? You perform Brahma Yajna by teaching Brahma Jnana to others, by living as accordingly. How do you perform Deva Yajna? By doing pujas, rituals in your everyday in your home. Householders have to do it. Again, Pitri Yajna, how do you do Shraddha and other ceremonies you perform? Or if you do something in the name of the departed souls, that is also a way of performing Yajna. Yajna here in the Pancha Maha Yajna context, Yajna means giving back to our ancestors, sages, or Rishi Parambara, giving back our indebtedness. You are indebted to your...
Repaying the 5 rinas.
Yeah, it is called Rana. It's called Rana. So, Rana has got different meanings in this Smriti literature, you know. But here, Pancha Maha Yajna, the word Yajna, I was explaining the concept of Yajna. So, in its very earthly empirical sense, Yajna means you study something from a teacher. And how do you pay back to him? You are helped by somebody, you are a teacher, to learn a subject very well. You teach another person. So you pay back. It is actually a kind of Rishi Yajna. So Brahma Yajna can somebody called Rishi Yajna. Okay? Even ordinary people, when somebody comes to your home, the ordinary humanistic impulse called Aditi Yajna, called Nara Yajna, Nru Yajna, all these terms are there, the same. Different terms are used. Again, Bali Vaishudeva Yajna, that is a ritualistic practice performed by Grihasthas on certain occasions. Well known the Naimitya karmas. You know, Naimitya karmas. The karmas are actually Pancha Maha Yajnas come from 3 kinds of karma concept. Nitya karma, Naimitya karma and Kamya karmas. That's a different subject, not related here. But here our central theme is Yajna. So how this Yajna, which takes a very earthly form, like for example, let's say Rishi Yajna. You teach Vedas or Vedanta philosophy to somebody. You're paying back to your ancient Rishi Parambara, the succession of great sages of the past. Because what they realized, what they wrote, what they taught humanity, you are trying to preserve by teaching to somebody. You're paying that indebtedness. So it's a simple meaning. Now, same Yajna concept, it assumes a new profoundness and sublimity in Purusha Suktam, where Brahman, Paramatma Surupa itself, does the act of creation as a Yajna. Just imagine. Remember, one should never try to analyze a great mystical poem the way we analyze a manual of your gadgets. You know, when you purchase a machine, you get a small book how to operate that machine. Every word is very simple and clear. That is not the style of a Vedic poet. A Vedic poetical works contain lot of allegories, mystical meanings. A word the word yajna means something much more sublime in the Purusha Sutta concept. Deva yajna matanyvata, yet Purushena kavisha deva yajna matanyvata. Purusha itself becomes the fundamental material of the yajna. And deva yajna matanyvata. Vasando asyasid ajyam krishma idma shara kavihi. See, Vasanta, spring season, also becomes ajya, means it becomes how we see Vasando asyasid ajyam grishma itma sharat kavihi. So Sharat, this autumnal season, it became kavihi. Grishma is the summer season, it became idma means samit, the dry faggots of wood that may be used for burning the fire of yajna. So, and again in the commentaries by other commentators, they are bringing 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and all that. The Trisapta Samita Kritaha, I find 21 samit. We'll explain that later. What are the 21 faggots of wood used for this sacrifice? For the ritual, you come to that later. Trisapta Samita Kritaha. So, we will don't jump from to some other verse that we are going to discuss maybe next after session. Okay, thank you.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
I have a question it's always like when you say that the yajna of day-to-day activities is to offer whatever one does or thinks to God. Otherwise, it builds more karma that one has to unwind. How does one actually do that? I mean, it's just, is it as simple as saying, I offer this to God? That seems rather trivial if that's all it is. It seems like, how does one really offer it?
True. No, I gave 2 definitions of yajna at the beginning itself. One, as you mentioned, a bit trivial. Something. Actually, it's very trivial in a way. You want to please some gods, goddesses, and you offer something. That's a real meaning. That's one interpretation. That is a very earthly. But another one is yajñovai sreshthtamam karma. A karma means action. Sreshtham, sreshtharam, sreshthatama means most sublime, most elevated kind of action. That is yajna. That's a definition that's to be understood in the context of Purusha Suktam. That is Katyayana's interpretation. Yajño why actually means in the old English translations, verily, emphasis. So yajna is nothing but any noble. Actually, the real meaning in noblest is the superlative degree. Sreshtatama means superlative degree. So, the most sublime, the most, the noblest way of doing anything is yajna. How does it become so sublime? When the actor, the one who does it, has absolutely no desire, is totally non-attached, still he does his best. Actually, he is sacrificing himself, if you use the word sacrifice. Actually, he is renouncing everything for doing something wonderful. So that, doing everything with all sincerity, with all serenity, then only becomes yajna. Sanctity and sacredness. When you put a flower on an altar, so we do it as a great sacred act. Not the way we hold a newspaper in our right hand or left hand. That activity will be qualitatively different from putting a flower on the altar. The latter one is a kind of yajna. because sacredness and sanctity, and what we call Shraddha in Sanskrit, all these are involved. When you do that with all intensity, but zero selfishness, zero attachment motive, it is called Sreshtatamam Karma. Now, in the Purusha Suktam, Paramatma Surupa Eva, the Purusha, created this world as an act of putting flower at the altar, means yajna. Okay, that is called Prajapati yajna. That's the interpretation. So, remember, yajna, I was giving different interpretations, different meanings of yajna, because if I give a simple meaning, I want to make this session a bit more comprehensive than very earthly, simple, straightforward. I wanted to make it a little more academic, because unlike the Sunday lectures, which are meant for the common audience, here we are, I'm sure those who are sitting in front of me are highly evolved intellectuals and students of philosophy. See, look at the subject, the fundamental text of Indian philosophy. And we are quoting from works, the Vedas, the commentaries on the Vedas, and all the great texts of ancient times. It is much more ancient than the oldest of Greek philosophical texts, you can imagine. So I want to give a little more far-fetched and academically expanded interpretation. That's why I use the word yajna in different connotations, this idea. Thank you for the question. It gave me a chance to explain, which otherwise I would not be able to explain properly. Thank you.
How does one, like in the Gita, it says offer one's whatever one does to the Lord or to Brahman, but it's easy to do that in a way, offering a flower on the altar. But when one tries to offer purchases or one's work in the world, one sees that although one said the words, "I offer this to Brahman," one actually finds that when something bad happens, we lose a job, we feel bad, as if we never offered it to Brahman.
So when we do our best, whatever may be a profession or job or duty, when we do our best with all sincerity and honesty, at the same time, we may not succeed. You cannot be sure you will succeed, though you work very hard with all sincerity. And if our actions produce a lot of problems, when we are engaged in an action, we become anxious about the possible results. When the results are not up to the expectation, we become disappointed. All these things happen. So Gita brings in this idea of Swadharma, which is actually nothing but yajna, giving in another word. So whatever may be our duty by virtue of our education or application or profession or resources, whatever may be the duty of a teacher is to teach, the duty of a doctor is to treat patients, like that. When we are fully dedicated to that work with all sincerity, at the same time, when we look upon it as our way of justifying our existence in this world. See, the education you have received as a doctor, you are justifying when you try to treat a patient. The education you have received in university, you are trying to justify when you teach your students well, whatever may be, like that. So, we have a way of justifying our existence and our identity in this world by trying to do the best that is possible. It becomes a kind of sacred, sanctified activity. It becomes a yajna. And Yogi raised a very interesting, and I'm very happy, it's a very important question. Yogi, you raised the question when somebody is trying to, maybe proselytize or forcibly teach you something. Well, I tell you, there is one word, which is a adjective, Sreshtatamam. That word is used. any action which is Sreshtatamam is a Nabunsalika, neutral center, karma. So Sreshtatamam comes. What is Sreshtatamam? Actually, this is called Taratama, Sreshtam, Sreshtataram, Sreshtatamam means superlative. Strong, stronger and strongest light in English. So Sreshtatamam means the most exalted. That's the real meaning, the most exalted. When does a action become the most exalted action? When it doesn't deliberately hurt anyone, do any harm to anyone, done with all noble intentions, then it becomes an exalted kind of activity. See, when we are giving in a class, a Zoom session, somebody listening from 8,000 miles away, and if anyone feels we are imposing our teaching on them, they can just switch off the computer, that's all. But somebody is standing right in the street corner, shouting with a huge megaphone, disturbing people living in the neighborhood, the sound pollution, that is certainly a kind of problem. But if somebody is sitting 8,000 miles away in the front of a computer, teaching something like universal spirituality, universal compassion, sanctity and sacredness of our actions, the need for broad-mindedness, and then somebody feels highly disturbed, you are imposing, So, it's very important. Actually, this is kind of Sreshtatamam karma, because we are totally non-attached and we are totally established the ideal of non-violence. We don't hurt anyone. We don't force anyone to change their views. We don't even force anyone to listen to us. Remember. So it becomes Sreshtatamam karma. And I'm much obliged to every one of you, because your questions enable me to explain things better. So that is the greatness of Vedanta. You see, Swami Vivekananda said, and Purusha Suktam is nothing but Vedanta in the language of mystical poem. So Swami Vivekananda said, even an agnostic or an atheist, if he becomes a good human being, that's the essence of spirituality. That's all. That is what Gita says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 12th chapter, Samdushta Satatam Yogi Yadatma Dhrinishteka, all the Advaita Sarabhudana, Maitra Karuna Evaja, Nirmamo Nirahankara, Samadukha Sukakshami Sandushta. Like that, Lord Krishna gives a list of the ideal bhakta, the ideal devotee. He never tells you, even once, you should pray to me, you should go to the temple. No, he only tells you, please be a good, noble human being, and you can be spiritual. That's something very interesting. To be spiritual, you don't have to do anything except becoming a good, noble, human and humane being. That's the essence of spirituality. So thank you, every one of you. Thank you, namaskar. Hoping to meet you again next time, next Sunday. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishnarpanamastu.